Hi, I'm Geoff Wilkinson and I'm Managing Director of Wilkinson Construction Consultants. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the Building a Safer Future report. This is a consultation that's been produced by the government in response to Dame Hackett's report, and it's the next stage of the implementation plan. It's a massive 190 plus pages in length, so it's going to be the sort of thing that's going to be really difficult for anyone to have read in depth. That's why we're producing this short video to try and explain the key points to you. It's absolutely essential that as many people as possible get the opportunity to respond to this particular consultation. It's especially important that people who don't normally have a voice get the chance to put their point of view across. So that's why I'm particularly reaching out to you today, especially if you are a tenant in a high-rise block, because this is all about the future of fire safety for you and your family's safety for the future. That's why we've produced this video explaining all of the details, and additionally, if you go to our website, you'll find a copy of a draft consultation response, which is a short response which you can top and tail and send across yourself to respond to this consultation. That makes sure that you get your voice heard with the minimum amount of involvement from yourself, but it still gives you the chance to have your voice heard. The consultation runs until the end of July, so it's important that we start to act fast on this. If you are watching this video, please go straight along to the website in order to be able to download a copy of that consultation response and get it sent through. It's also particularly important because we now have a new minister for the building regulations function. This is Esther McVeigh, someone who you probably already have heard of. Not only should you send a copy of the consultation to the relevant department, I also recommend that you copy it to Esther McVeigh herself. That way you'll get your voice heard in the very loudest possible way. Okay, the best place of course is to start at the beginning, and that's chapter 1. Now, chapter 1 of the consultation document is all about what the government has done up until now. You really don't need to focus too much on this because this is just a really quick recap on all of the things that they've done up until now, things like the testing regime and the documentations that they've produced already. As I say, this is not particularly important, so let's move on to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is all about the buildings that this proposed regime will start to deal with. Now, in the original report, Dame Hackett proposed that this would only apply to buildings over 10 stories in height. The government have taken that on board, but they now think that in fact buildings over 18 metres in height should be included. Now, this is an important step forward in the government realising just how important the issue is, but in our opinion, it doesn't go anywhere near far enough. You may well have seen the recent fire in Barking Riverside. This was significantly less than 18 metres in height, and yet still people's lives were put at risk because of the fire safety measures when the balconies caught fire. Now, what we would like to see is that all buildings are covered under the new regime to ensure that fire safety in these buildings is picked up regardless of their height, because height isn't the important function here. It's safety that's key. It's the risk that people, in particular the tenants and the residents that are in these buildings, face. That's the key, not the height of the building. If you're going to apply a height, then the most important or most relevant height would be 11 metres in height, because this is the highest level that the fire service can realistically use a ladder to evacuate you from the property down the ladder and out. But we still don't think that that goes far enough. That's why we would like to see it apply to all buildings of all heights. So let me try and put this into context. There are somewhere in the region of 5,000 buildings that are over the 10 stories in height. There are something like 12,000 buildings that are over 18 metres in height. If we're going to drive a culture change throughout the industry, that's still a tiny proportion of the millions of buildings that there are in the UK. So it simply won't touch the edges of the issue. There is literally not a day goes by where you don't see some report, whether it's on the TV or social media, complaining about the standards in current housing developments. If we're going to tackle those, we need a response that tackles all buildings of all heights and not just those that are proposed in this document. In chapter 3, they move on to the concept of duty holders. Now, there are a number of duty holders throughout the whole of the process. And one of the things that we found from Grenfell Tower was that it was really difficult to identify who had responsibility and what they had responsibility for. So that's what this section is really looking at, ensuring that the people who are carrying out the works, designing, contracting and handing the building over, have clearly defined duties under the proposed regulations. Alongside the duty holders, there's also a proposal for an accountable person. This is the person with overall responsibility. Now, quite often a building will be owned effectively by a company or by an organisation. This is intended to create a single person who has overall accountability. So it's the one person you can actually go to find out who is responsible for whatever aspect it is. So it starts to really apply that duty back down and holds one person accountable. Now, this also creates a series of problems as well, because are there individuals that do actually have the ability to take that role on? Will they have the knowledge? Will they have the understanding? And perhaps more importantly as well, will they be able to get insurance in order to enable them to take that role on? Will there be any appetite to take that role on? That's something that government really need to look at and to tackle. Yet another proposed title within the consultation is that of building safety manager. Now, this is someone that the tenants could go to and they could report any issues or incidents to. This is the person who has effectively got day-to-day responsibility for running the building and ensuring that all of the necessary standards are in place and those standards are met on a day-to-day basis. As a resident of one of these high-rise buildings, you may well be concerned about all of the additional cost and bureaucracy that this new system will be putting into place. And whilst it is important that we have these people involved and that they have clear responsibilities, we're concerned that this will actually just add to the costs, and these costs will be produced or pushed back down to the individual tenants, to the householders, the leaseholders, to those people that live in these buildings. Has that been thought through? Is that something that is acceptable to you as a resident in this building? It's key that someone has that responsibility, but is it fair that you're expected to pay for this appointment? And just who will be appointed? Who can we rely upon to ensure that the right people are appointed with the right qualifications for the jobs, and it won't just be another person within the same organisation that's just given that role and is given a role which is just literally lip service. We need to ensure that that person is effectively independent and can speak on behalf of the residents to those people who are in power overall with the building, and that they can act and have a budget so that they can in fact implement the changes or the improvements that are necessary on your behalf. Chapter 4 covers those rights that you will have under the new regime to ensure that you can raise those kind of comments, that you can put your case forward, that you are able to raise your concerns. Now, this is all very good, but one of the things that we've seen up until now is that people have had pressure put upon them to keep them quiet, to make them go away. We've seen people who are told that they can't video, for example, that they can't collect evidence. And it's vitally important as part of this consultation that your voices are heard correctly. So it must be the case that when you are able to report these things, or when you're looking to report these things, that you have the freedom to be able to look into things, and that information is given to you, and that you have access to the relevant parts of the building in order to be able to put those forward. And in the case that you need to bring something forward, that you actually have legal funding to be able to bring that case against the relevant party as necessary. So that's an important protection that we'd like to see as part of this consultation process. Chapter 5 is all about the regulator. Now, in the previous version of the consultation, they had something called the JCA, the Joint Competent Authority. We're now looking at a new regulatory body instead of the JCA. So the way that we understand this at the moment is that this body will have the ultimate regulatory authority. It's not clear exactly who this will be or how it will be set up. And it's important to try to find out who this will be and how the government are actually proposing to implement this. We've already set out our concerns previously about the role of local authorities, particularly where they have a financial interest in the building for which they would be overseeing. So we're keen to ensure that this new authority is indeed an independent regulatory body that sits above the local authority itself. What we'd like to see is a situation where they have responsibility for signing off on all of the work overall, and that the independent bodies, whether it's local authority, building control, fire service, whether it's approved inspectors or anybody else that's involved in the process, feed the information into this regulatory body, and they're the ones that make the ultimate decision about whether a building can be occupied or whether it can't be occupied. But it's essential that any of those organisations underneath that are checked for independence, and we're keen that this new regulatory body has that function. It sets the regulations, it sets out the independence of those that are involved in implementing the regulations. Chapter 6 deals about the enforcement process, about the sanctions and ensuring that the buildings are actually made to comply. Another thing that we're really keen on for the new regulatory body is that it has some teeth. It has powers of enforcement. We want to see a situation where there are proper stop notices, that buildings that haven't got planned approval simply cannot be built. And we need to see this as soon as possible. One of our concerns with the regime as it's currently proposed is that this could take several years before it's implemented. Now, if that's the case, we could be producing buildings for the next 3, 4, 5 years into the system that we know are going to need to be changed again in the future. So it's vital that we have this part of the proposal implemented as quickly as possible. That will mean that any buildings that are delivered in the next couple of years will actually be compliant, and we won't be going back and reinventing the wheel on these buildings. There are already, as I've said, 5,000 to 12,000 buildings that are going to have a safety case produced after they've been built. But what's more important is that we're not producing buildings tomorrow that still won't comply. So it's essential that we have these stops in place, that we have the 3 stages: the planning stage approval, which will have outline building regs alongside it, the full plans approval, and the final occupation certificate, because no building should be occupied unless we are convinced that the new regulatory body are happy with it and it's okay for it to be signed off and occupied. So what is it that we're asking you to do? Hopefully this video has given you a quick taste of what the consultation is about and the importance of getting a response in. And we really do mean it's important. It really needs to be done in the next couple of days. So please go away, having seen this video, go to our website, download the response and send it through. On our website, you'll also find links to the consultation document itself and the full consultation response document. Now, this has lots and lots of questions on it. If you've got the time and you've got the inclination, by all means fill that in. Even if you haven't got time to respond in full detail or send off the top and tail version that we've got, just a quick email to Esther McVeigh or to the department just to put forward your concerns in a quick email, 5 or 6 sentences, will be an important step forward. It will make sure that your voice is heard. I've been Geoff Wilkinson. Thank you.